and welcome to 𝗤𝗵𝗱𝗲𝗂𝗋𝗆𝑡𝐻ouseplants.com, where we teach you all about gardening in the great indoors. Today's video is sponsored by our Amazon affiliate link, which you'll see in the comments section below. Today I'm going to talk to you about worm compost, one of my favorite amendments for soil. Worm compost is, to be frank, worm poop. And it's also called vermicompost. You can make your own or you can buy it bagged. Either works well. The great thing about worm compost, you can see it here, right here, is that it really doesn't, let's face it, doesn't look like poop. And even when you make your own, it doesn't look like poop. What it really looks like is a really nice, rich soil amendment. And that's what it is. As a matter of fact, worms are one of the few creatures that can really boast that their you-know-what does not stink, because it really doesn't. It actually smells really nice and earthy, and it does great things for your soil. So what they have actually found in studies is that worm compost will add nutrients to your soil, and what it does is it adds a lot of different nutrients. So they've done various studies on it, and they have found that the worm compost has all kinds of nutrients, a lot of micronutrients that plants really need. And I'm going to be putting some into this guy here because I think that he is a little micronutrient deficient, if you can see some of the spotting on the leaves. So that's what we're going to do today for him, and I'll show you how to do that as well. Talking a little bit more about worm compost. So they have even done studies where they found that the worm compost actually makes plants disease resistant. So that is why we have worms outside crawling all over the place inside of the ground, because it is making it's helping the plants to become more disease resistant. So that's something else to consider with worm compost. It also looks pretty as a mulch, so we could put this worm compost right on top of the plant. Another thing you can do is put it inside of the plant at the root zone where it can get the nutrients more quickly, which is what I'm going to do with this plant. Usually you want to do that, especially with plants that are a little compromised, to get those micronutrients down there. Now, the question is, will you get worms in your houseplant soil? There are some eggs in the worm compost, so yes, you could. Generally speaking, they will stay in the soil. Do keep that in mind, though. If you're repotting, you might want to go outside in case the worm does wiggle out. Although, to be quite frank, I put them back in the soil. But my mother, who is highly afraid of worms, would be horrified by that. So I have never told her that. At any rate, I haven't had any problems with them crawling out or doing anything. They stay in there. And it's not all the time. It's a lot of times the worm compost will just fertilize your soil and you'll be fine. So the other thing to consider is that the worm compost also tends to, well, if you do have worms, the worms will break up airspace at the root zone as well, which is also good for the roots. So we are going to add some worm compost to this guy here, and going to make holes, and I'm going to go down about 1 inch. You can go down 1 inch, 1.5 inches. I like to use something that's a little smaller than a pencil for this. Do this with granular fertilizers. Sprinkle some in. The nice thing to consider about worm compost is it's so low because it's completely natural. It doesn't have a lot of really strong nutrients in it, so it's not, so you can't basically, it's very hard to overdo adding worm compost to your soil. So you don't have to worry about burning the roots with it. So I'm going to go around here, and you put that in, you do that, and then the worm compost goes down. You can pat it down. Do it again here. And this is going to help the plant with any micronutrient deficiencies it has. It will help it fight off any diseases it may have. It's a wonderful organic amendment just for overall really, really healthy growth. Do one more here. And then what you want to do afterwards, but I think I'm going to sprinkle a little bit on top as well. Because that will work its way in, and it does act as a nice, it will act as a nice mulch too. It will keep the soil surface a little bit moister than it would be otherwise. Okay, now anytime you add any kind of amendment, including worm compost, you want to water it in well, so that way it'll activate. Using warm water when I'm watering it in. One of my videos explains the importance of that. I filled this up a little bit, so I'm going to probably want to tamp down. I overfilled a little by adding the worm compost. So I want to tamp down around the edges here a little bit to keep the water in so it doesn't rush off. So you want to keep that in mind too. If you are repotting a plant, you can do so with worm compost. You can add in, you want to probably add in about 1/4 to, so 1 part worm compost to 4 parts soil. You can go lower than that. You can even go a little higher than that. That's perfectly fine. As I mentioned, it's very hard to, basically, you're not going to hurt your plants with the worm compost. So tried that. It's helped a little bit. So if you are repotting and you do want to mulch with some worm compost, you want to leave about 1/4 of an inch of lip underneath so that you can put the worm compost on top so it won't be flowing over as it is in this plant. But you can, if you have already done that, work it down a little bit around the lip to keep the water in when you water. And water slowly, that also helps. So that is it for the wonders of worm compost in your houseplants. I'm growing them in the houseplant soil. Please leave any indoor gardening tutorials you'd like to see. And remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video.